My name is Jacqueline, 35 years old, and working as a software engineer in Boston. Life turned out pretty good for me, despite growing up with a mother who never missed an opportunity to remind me I was unwanted. Last Thanksgiving, I finally decided to accept the invitation to dinner at my parents' house, hoping for reconciliation. I never imagined Marion would publicly announce she wished I was never born, or that I would find the courage to respond. Before I tell you what happened at that dinner table, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up for yourself against family. I grew up in Fairfield, Connecticut, a picturesque suburb with tree-lined streets and colonial-style homes. From the outside, our family looked perfect. Dad worked as an accountant, Mom volunteered at church, and my sister and I attended good schools. But inside our 4-bedroom house, with its carefully maintained garden, a different reality existed. Marion, my mother, ran our household with precision and criticism. Nothing I did ever seemed good enough for her. When I brought home straight, as she would ask why I did not join more extracurricular activities like the other kids. When I won second place in the science fair, she wondered aloud why I could not have taken first. Even my appearance became a target. My hair was never quite right. My clothes never fashionable enough, my posture never straight enough. My father Howard was physically present but emotionally absent. He buried himself in work, coming home late most evenings, and when confronted with the tension between Marion and me, he would mumble something about women needing to work things out among themselves. His strategy was avoidance, retreating to his den to watch television whenever voices rose in the kitchen. Then there was my sister Heather, 3 years older and the apple of our mother's eye. Unlike me with my bookish ways and quiet nature, Heather was outgoing, popular, and athletic. She was a cheerleader, dated the quarterback, and was crowned prom queen. Marion never tired of telling me why I could not be more like my sister. I remember my 10th birthday party. Marion had reluctantly agreed to let me invite 5 friends over for cake. When Jenny spilled punch on our cream-colored carpet, Marion spent the next hour scrubbing furiously while muttering about my poor choice in friends. Later, as we sang happy birthday, she complained about the noise giving her a headache and retreated upstairs. My friends exchanged uncomfortable glances, and I pretended not to notice as I blew out my candles, wishing for a mother who loved me. In 7th grade, I won the regional spelling bee. Howard came to watch and clapped proudly when I correctly spelled idiosyncrasy for the win. When we got home, Marion was preparing dinner. "How did it go?" she asked, barely looking up from chopping vegetables. "Jacqueline won," Howard announced with a rare display of enthusiasm. Marion nodded. "That is nice." Heather was invited to join National Honor Society today. My trophy sat untouched on the counter for a week before I quietly moved it to my bedroom shelf. High school brought more of the same. When college acceptance letters arrived, Marion seemed disappointed rather than proud when I got into MIT with a partial scholarship. "Boston is so far away," she said. "And who will help around the house?" Heather stayed local for college. College became my escape. I thrived in the computer science program, making real friends who appreciated my intelligence and dry humor. For the first time, I felt valued for being exactly who I was. I worked part-time at the campus IT department and took summer internships in Boston, coming home only for brief obligatory holiday visits that inevitably ended with me in tears and Marion claiming I had always been too sensitive. After graduation, I took a job with a tech firm in Boston. The physical distance helped, but family gatherings remained exercises in endurance. Marion continued her pattern of criticism and comparison. When Heather got engaged to Thomas, a dentist from a good family, Marion called to tell me I should really think about settling down soon because women in our family age poorly. Over the next decade, I built my life deliberately and carefully. I advanced in my career, eventually becoming a senior software engineer specializing in artificial intelligence applications. I bought a small but stylish condo in Cambridge, traveled internationally, and cultivated deep friendships. I dated occasionally, but never felt pressured to settle down just to meet some arbitrary timeline. My contact with family dwindled to obligatory birthday calls and short visits every other Christmas. Howard would occasionally call his conversations stilted but well-meaning. Heather and I exchanged superficial text messages about twice a year. Marion sent formal birthday and Christmas cards with no personal messages, just her perfect signature at the bottom. 3 months before that fateful Thanksgiving dinner, Howard called out of the blue. "Your mother and I were talking," he began hesitantly, "and we thought it might be nice if you came home for Thanksgiving this year. The whole family will be here. Heather and Thomas, of course. Aunt Linda and Uncle Frank are flying in from Arizona, the cousins too." I felt the familiar tightness in my chest. I usually have plans with friends I hedged. "I know you do," Howard said, his voice uncharacteristically emotional. "But family is important, Jacqueline, and your mother, well, she is getting older. We all are." The implication hung in the air. Time was passing. Opportunities for reconciliation were finite. "Let me check my calendar," I said finally. "I will call you back." That night, I spoke with my therapist, Dr. Rachel, whom I had been seeing for 2 years to work through my childhood issues. "What do you think about going?" she asked. "Part of me hopes something will be different," I admitted. "That maybe age has softened her, that maybe we could have some kind of relationship before it is too late. And the other part expects exactly what has always happened: criticism, comparison, coming home feeling like that awkward, unwanted child again." "You are not that child anymore, Doctor," Rachel reminded me. "You are an accomplished adult with boundaries and choices. Whatever you decide, remember that." A week later, I called Howard back and accepted the invitation. "That is wonderful," he said, sounding genuinely pleased. "Your mother will be happy to hear it." I doubted that very much, but I kept the thought to myself. In the weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, I prepared mentally and emotionally. I bought a new outfit, a burgundy sweater dress that was both professional and flattering. I practiced responses to potential criticisms. I reminded myself of my accomplishments and worth. I was no longer a child desperate for approval. I was Jacqueline Anderson, senior software engineer, homeowner, good friend, and worthy human being regardless of Marion's opinion. Yet, as the day approached, the old anxiety returned. The night before Thanksgiving, I barely slept, rehearsing conversations in my head and trying to anticipate every possible interaction. By morning, I felt exhausted but resolute. I would go, I would be civil, and I would maintain my boundaries. I never imagined how tested those boundaries would be before the night was over. The drive from Boston to Fairfield took just under 3 hours. I left early Thursday morning, my car packed with an overnight bag, a bottle of expensive wine for dinner, and a carefully selected hostess gift for Marion. A handcrafted ceramic serving platter from a local Boston artist. The November day was clear, but cold, bare trees lining the highway as I made my way south. To calm my nerves, I listened to a confidence-building meditation podcast and practiced the breathing techniques Dr. Rachel had taught me. "You are not responsible for their reactions," I repeated to myself as I merged onto I-95. "You are only responsible for your own behavior." As I exited the highway and navigated the familiar streets of my hometown, memories surfaced unbidden. There was the park where Heather had her 16th birthday party, to which Marion had invited all of Heather's friends, but told me I needed to stay home to help serve food. There was my old high school where Marion had once loudly criticized my choir performance in front of my friends. And there was Main Street, where she had once left me waiting for over an hour after debate club because she had forgotten she was supposed to pick me up. I turned onto Maple Avenue, the street I grew up on, and immediately noticed that the Thompson house on the corner had been painted from blue to gray. The Millers had put in a new fence. But as I approached number 43, my parents' colonial-style house looked exactly as it always had. Same cream-colored exterior with green shutters. Same neatly trimmed boxwood hedges. Same wreath on the front door, though this one had autumn leaves and berries instead of the usual Christmas decorations that would appear the day after Thanksgiving like clockwork. Several cars already lined the driveway. I recognized Heather's silver SUV and what must be Aunt Linda and Uncle Frank's rental. I parked on the street, took one final deep breath, and gathered my things. Before I could even knock, the front door swung open. Howard stood there, his hair grayer than I remembered, but his smile genuine. "Jacqueline," he said warmly, stepping forward to embrace me. "You made it." I returned his hug, surprised at the emotion that welled up. "Hi, Dad." He took the wine from me and ushered me inside. The house smelled of roasting turkey and cinnamon exactly as it had every Thanksgiving of my childhood. The familiar scent brought an unexpected lump to my throat. Marion Howard called toward the kitchen. "Jacqueline is here." A moment later, Marion appeared wiping her hands on an apron. At 62, she remained an attractive woman. Her blonde hair now carefully colored to hide the gray, her figure still slim, her posture perfect, as always. She wore tailored black pants and a blue cashmere sweater under her apron with pearl earrings and light makeup. Everything about her appearance was controlled and deliberate, just as it had always been. "Jacqueline," she said with a nod that was neither warm nor cold. "I see you made it safely." "Hello, Mother," I replied, stepping forward to offer the gift bag with the serving platter. "This is for you. From a local artist in Boston." She accepted it with a small smile that did not reach her eyes. "How thoughtful. I will just put this in the dining room. Everyone is in the living room. Go say hello." And with that, she disappeared back into the kitchen, not even pausing to look inside the bag. Howard gave me an encouraging smile. "Come on," he said. "The whole gang is here." The living room was indeed full of family. Aunt Linda, Marion's sister, rushed over to hug me. "Jacqueline, sweetheart, it has been too long." Unlike Marion, Linda had always been affectionate and kind to me. Though they were sisters, they could not have been more different. Where Marion was controlled and critical, Linda was expressive and accepting. "Hi, Aunt Linda," I said, genuinely happy to see her. "How was your flight from Arizona?" "Oh, you know how it is these days, cramped seats and airport delays. But worth it to see everyone." "Frank, look who is here." Uncle Frank, a retired high school principal with a booming voice and kind eyes, came over to give me a bear hug. "There she is, the tech genius of the family. Your dad tells us you are doing amazing things with computers these days." I smiled, warmed by his enthusiasm. "Just working on some AI applications. Nothing too exciting." "Nothing too exciting," she says, Frank laughed. "Listen to that modesty." From the corner of the room, my sister Heather approached her husband Thomas, trailing behind. Heather had maintained her cheerleader figure into her late 30s, her blonde hair styled in an expensive bob, her outfit likely from a high-end boutique. "Jacqueline," she said, giving me a quick hug that felt more obligatory than affectionate. "Nice sweater." "Is it new?" "Thanks, yes it is." Thomas shook my hand. "Good to see you again, Jacqueline. It has been, 2 years? About that, I agreed, though it had actually been 3 since Heather's anniversary party, another uncomfortable family gathering. "Jacqueline." 2 voices called simultaneously, and I turned to see my cousins Jessica and Kyle approaching. Jessica, Linda and Frank's daughter, was 30 and worked as a kindergarten teacher in Phoenix. Kyle, their son, was 27 and had recently finished law school. Their genuine warmth was a relief after Heather's cool reception. Jessica hugged me tightly. "I love your hair this length," she said. "And we have so much to catch up on." Kyle gave me a fist bump, an old joke between us from childhood. "The programmer and the lawyer," he said with a grin. "Aunt Marion must be so proud of our prestigious careers." I laughed, appreciating his subtle acknowledgement of Marion's materialism and status consciousness. The final guest was Donna, Marion's longtime friend from her church committee. Donna had been a fixture at family gatherings for years, and I always suspected she enjoyed witnessing the family drama as a form of entertainment. "Jacqueline, dear," she said, air kissing near my cheek. "Still in Boston. No special. Someone yet?" Before I could respond, Howard announced that drinks were being served, saving me from Donna's probing questions about my love life. For the next hour, we engaged in the kind of superficial catching up that characterizes many family gatherings. The conversation stayed safely in neutral territory: the unusually cold fall weather, Linda and Frank's new retirement community, Kyle's first law firm position, Jessica's classroom anecdotes. I sipped my wine, slowly conscious of wanting to keep my wits about me. Several times I caught Marion watching me from across the room, her expression unreadable. Each time our eyes met, she would quickly look away or find something that needed her attention. The old familiar tension began building in my shoulders. At one point, Howard cornered me by the fireplace. "I am glad you came," he said quietly. "It means a lot. To both of us." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Did it really mean anything to Marion? Or was this just Howard's wishful thinking? When Marion announced that dinner was ready, we filed into the dining room, where the table had been extended to accommodate all 10 of us. The setting was picture perfect as always. Marion's best china, crystal glasses, polished silver, and an elaborate centerpiece of autumn flowers and miniature pumpkins. Name cards indicated our seating arrangement, and I noticed I had been placed between Uncle Frank and Kyle, with Marion at the opposite end of the table from me. As we took our seats, I allowed myself a small hope that perhaps the evening would continue peacefully. The food looked delicious. The conversation had remained civil, and being seated far from Marion reduced the opportunities for direct conflict. Little did I know that the real tension was just beginning to build, and that dessert would bring a moment that would change our family dynamic forever. The turkey was perfectly roasted, the stuffing moist, the cranberry sauce homemade. Marion had always been an excellent cook, using her culinary skills as another arena for perfection and control. As platters were passed and plates filled, the conversation initially remained light. "Jacqueline, would you like white or dark meat?" Howard asked as he prepared to serve me. "Dark, please," I replied. "Always been my favorite." "Just like when you were little," Uncle Frank commented with a smile. "Some things never change." Marion set down her water glass with a deliberate motion. "Some things do change, Frank. Jacqueline hardly ever comes home anymore. We barely know her preferences these days." The table went quiet for a moment before Linda jumped in. "Well, we are all busy adults with our own lives. That is how it should be. And speaking of changes, Frank and I are thinking of getting an RV next year. Imagine us the retirement nomads." I shot her a grateful look as the conversation shifted to travel plans and bucket list destinations. Linda had always been good at diffusing Marion's conversational landmines. As the main course progressed, Howard asked about everyone's work. Heather talked about her interior design business, which catered to wealthy clients in Fairfield County. Thomas shared an anecdote about a difficult dental patient. Kyle discussed his first major case at the law firm. When attention turned to me, I briefly explained the AI project I was leading. "We are developing algorithms that can predict maintenance needs in manufacturing equipment, potentially saving companies millions in downtime and repairs." "That sounds fascinating," Frank said enthusiastically. "Is it like that movie where the computers start thinking for themselves?" I laughed. "Not quite that dramatic. But it is pretty cutting-edge technology." "Did you get that promotion you were hoping for?" Howard asked. I nodded, feeling a small spark of pride. "Actually, yes. I was made senior project lead last month. It came with a nice raise and my own team." "Well, that is wonderful news," Linda exclaimed. Marion took a small sip of wine. "I suppose that means you will be even busier now, even less time for family." "Actually," I countered, trying to keep my voice light. "The new position gives me more flexibility to set my own schedule." Marion made a non-committal sound and turned to Heather. "Tell everyone about the Hamilton Estate project, dear. The one with the imported Italian marble." And just like that, my achievement was dismissed and the spotlight redirected to Heather, who launched into a detailed description of her latest design triumph. I focused on my plate, reminding myself that I no longer needed Marion's approval or attention. As dinner continued, the wine flowed more freely, and with it, tongues loosened. Marion began recounting family stories, most of which seemed designed to showcase Heather's achievements or my shortcomings. "Remember when Jacqueline tried out for cheerleading?" Marion said with a laugh. "She was so determined, but coordination was never her strong suit. The coach very kindly suggested she might be better suited to the debate team." Heather chimed in. "I had to show her some moves in the backyard. It was hopeless." Everyone chuckled politely, including Howard, who seemed relieved that the stories were being received as light-hearted reminiscences rather than pointed criticisms. "What about the time Jacqueline decided to cut her own bangs the night before school pictures?" Marion continued, warming to her theme. She looked like she had been attacked by garden shears. More laughter. I forced a smile, feeling like I was 12 years old again, burning with embarrassment as Marion pointed out my flaws to anyone who would listen. Actually, I said, attempting to reclaim the narrative that experience taught me an important lesson about patience. Now I always research thoroughly before jumping into anything. Yes, you always were cautious, Marian agreed, but her tone suggested this was not a compliment. Sometimes too cautious. Heather was always the brave one, willing to take risks. I took another sip of wine larger than I intended. The old dynamics were reasserting themselves, and I could feel my carefully constructed adult confidence beginning to crack. Under the table, I pressed my nails into my palm, using the small pain to ground myself in the present. Jacqueline has taken plenty of risks, Kyle interjected unexpectedly. Moving to a new city, working in cutting-edge technology. That takes courage. I shot him a grateful look, but Marian was already moving on. Donna, did I tell you Heather and Thomas are looking at vacation properties in the Berkshires? Such a wise investment. The conversation shifted to real estate values and vacation homes. A topic that excluded me, since I had neither the interest nor the finances for a second property. I exchanged glances with Kyle, who rolled his eyes slightly in solidarity. As the dinner plates were cleared and Marian went to the kitchen to prepare coffee to accompany dessert, Howard leaned across the table toward me. "You are doing great," he whispered, "just a bit longer." His comment, while well-intentioned, irritated me. Why should enduring family dinner require encouragement, as if I were running a marathon? Why was it accepted that time with Marian was something to be endured rather than enjoyed? Marian returned with a tray of coffee cups, followed by Heather carrying Marian's famous apple pie and a container of premium vanilla ice cream. The dessert, like everything else, would be perfect. "Jacqueline, would you mind serving the ice cream while I cut the pie?" Marian asked, handing me a scoop. I stood and began adding scoops of ice cream to plates, as Marian precisely cut her pie into equal slices. It was such a normal domestic moment that I felt a strange pang. In another family, this might have been a warm memory in the making, mother and daughter working together to serve dessert. In ours, it was just another opportunity for me to fall short of expectations. Sure enough, as I served, Marian commented, "A little less ice cream on the next one, dear. Not everyone wants such large portions." I bit my tongue and adjusted the scoop size. As we finished serving and everyone exclaimed over how delicious the pie looked, the conversation turned to family planning, prompted by Donna asking if anyone had heard from her daughter who had just had a baby. "Speaking of babies," Heather said, setting down her fork and looking at Thomas with a smile, "Thomas and I have an announcement to make." All eyes turned to them as Thomas put his arm around Heather's shoulders. "We are expecting," Heather announced, "due in May." The table erupted in congratulations. Linda clapped her hands in delight. Frank raised his glass in a toast. Howard looked genuinely moved, his eyes misting slightly. "A grandchild," Marian said, her voice thick with emotion. "Our first grandchild. Oh, Heather." She rose to embrace her elder daughter, and I watched as they shared a moment of genuine connection that Marian and I had never experienced. I tried to feel happy for my sister, but the contrast between Marian's reaction to Heather's news and her usual response to anything in my life was stark and painful. "Congratulations," I said sincerely when the excitement had died down a bit. "That is wonderful news." Heather beamed. "Thanks, Jacqueline. You will be Aunt Jacqueline." "The baby will be so fortunate to have such a smart aunt," Jessica added kindly. Donna, never one for social subtlety, turned to me. "And what about you, Jacqueline? Any plans for children in your future? You do not want to wait too long, you know." The table went quiet. My perpetually single status had always been a source of concern for the older generation in our family. "I am not sure," I answered honestly. "I have not ruled it out, but I am also fine if it does not happen." I could have left it there, but something compelled me to continue. "I think it is important to really want children for the right reasons before having them. Every child deserves to be genuinely wanted and loved." The words hung in the air, unintentionally pointed. I had not meant it as a critique of my own upbringing, but as I looked around the table, I realized that was how it might be interpreted. That was when Marian set down her coffee cup and said the words that would change everything between us. "It does not matter," she said, her voice clear and cutting. "I wish you were never born anyway." The statement landed like a physical blow. For a moment, I thought I had misheard or misunderstood. But the expression on Marian's face confirmed that she had said exactly what she meant. Someone at the table laughed nervously, not sure how to respond. Then another. Soon, several people were chuckling uncomfortably, as if Marian had made a joke in poor taste, rather than revealed a devastating truth about how she viewed her own daughter. Everyone laughed. Except me. The laughter faded quickly as people registered my expression. The room suddenly felt frigid despite the warmth of the heating system. I set my fork down slowly, placing it precisely alongside my half-eaten slice of apple pie. The scrape of silver against fine china seemed unnaturally loud in the silence that had fallen. My heart was racing so hard I could feel my pulse in my throat, but outwardly I remained still. 20 years of conditioning had taught me not to show pain in front of Marian. She interpreted vulnerability as weakness and weakness as an invitation for further attack. Inside my head, a kaleidoscope of memories flashed by Marian turning away when I reached for her as a toddler. Marian sighing heavily when I asked for help with homework. Marian telling a 10-year-old me to stop crying after I fell off my bike because Anderson women are stronger than that. Marian absent from my college graduation because Heather had a minor cold and needed her. Marian's Christmas card last year signed simply Marian and Howard, rather than Mom and Dad, or even your parents. Each memory was a confirmation that her statement was not a momentary lapse, but the verbalization of a truth she had communicated in countless non-verbal ways throughout my life. I was unwanted. I was a mistake. My very existence was something she regretted. Howard cleared his throat. Marian, he said weakly, that is a terrible thing to say. Marian waved a dismissive hand. Oh, everyone is so sensitive these days. It was just a joke. But her eyes told a different story. There was a challenge in them as she looked at me across the table, daring me to make a scene to prove her right about my oversensitivity, to give her the moral high ground. Heather looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Thomas studied his dessert plate with sudden interest. Aunt Linda appeared genuinely distressed, one hand covering her mouth. Uncle Frank's jovial expression had hardened into something like anger. Cousins Jessica and Kyle exchanged wide-eyed glances. Donna, the eternal spectator to our family drama, leaned forward slightly, not wanting to miss what would happen next. In that frozen moment, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there. A burning ache in my chest, but rising alongside it was a strange sense of clarity. All these years I had been trying to earn the love and approval of someone fundamentally incapable of giving it. I had contorted myself, achieved, succeeded, tried to be perfect, all in the hope that someday Marian would look at me the way she looked at Heather. But she never would, and for the first time I truly understood that this was her failing, not mine. My pulse still racing, but my mind oddly calm. I slowly lifted my water glass and took a deliberate sip. Everyone at the table seemed to be holding their breath, waiting for my reaction. I could storm out. I could cry. I could lash back with an equally hurtful comment. All these responses would fit the script of our dysfunctional relationship, the dance we had been performing for 35 years. Instead, I set down my glass and smiled. Not a happy smile, but one of recognition of seeing clearly for perhaps the first time. The silence stretched, becoming uncomfortable for everyone except me. I had spent my entire life uncomfortable in Marian's presence. Let them feel it for once. Howard attempted again to salvage the situation. I think we should change the subject. Kyle, tell us more about that case you are working on. But Kyle was looking at me, concern evident in his expression. Jacqueline, are you okay? I appreciated his question, the acknowledgement that what had just happened was not normal, not acceptable, not something to be brushed aside in the interest of keeping the peace. Actually, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I would like to respond to what my mother just said. Marian's expression flickered briefly with something like uncertainty before settling back into her usual mask of control. Jacqueline, it was just a comment. No need to be dramatic. There it was again, the preemptive dismissal. The framing of any reaction from me as an overreaction. How many times had this tactic silenced me over the years? I am not being dramatic, I said calmly. I am simply responding to what you said. The room was completely still now. Even Donna had abandoned any pretense of enjoying the family drama and looked distinctly uncomfortable. I turned to face Marian, directly, making deliberate eye contact. For once, I would not be the one to look away first. For once, I would not absorb the blow and pretend it did not hurt. For once, I would speak my truth as clearly as she had just spoken hers. The memories continued to cascade through my mind. Every dismissal, every comparison to Heather, every withholding of affection, every criticism disguised as concern. But also newer memories, my friends in Boston celebrating my promotion with genuine joy. My therapy breakthroughs with Dr. Rachel. The peace I felt in my own home, decorated according to my taste, free from judgment. The person I had become, despite not because of my upbringing. Marian shifted in her seat, the silence finally affecting even her. "Well," she said, a slight edge to her voice. "What is it you want to say?" I took a deep breath. The moment felt pivotal, as if my entire life had been leading to this crossroads. Whatever I said next would change things permanently. There would be no going back to the uneasy truce, the surface civility masking deep wounds, the pretense that we were a normal family with normal disagreements. I was ready. More than ready, it was time. "I have spent my entire life trying to earn your love, Marian," I said, my voice quiet but clear. "Today I finally accept that it is not possible, and that is your loss, not mine." The simplicity of the statement seemed to intensify its impact. The room went dead silent. No one moved. No one even seemed to breathe. Marian's face flushed red, then paled. For once, she appeared genuinely speechless, her usual quick retorts failing her. Howard looked stricken, his gaze darting between his wife and daughter as if witnessing a car crash in slow motion. Heather's mouth had formed a small O of surprise. The others around the table had expressions ranging from shocked to uncomfortably fascinated to quietly supportive. "How dare you?" Marian finally managed, her voice trembling slightly. "After everything I have done for you, the sacrifices, the endless work of raising you, and this is the thanks I get: public disrespect at my own dinner table." I shook my head slowly. "This is not about gratitude or respect, Mother. It is about truth. You just told me in front of our entire family that you wish I had never been born. That was not a joke. That was an honest expression of how you feel about me, and it is consistent with how you have treated me my entire life." "That is absurd," Marian protested, looking around the table for support. "I have given this girl everything. The best schools, nice clothes, a good home. What more could anyone want? And she has always been difficult. Always been oversensitive. Always taken everything the wrong way." I noticed she was speaking about me in the third person, as if I were not present, another tactic she had often employed to diminish me. "I am sitting right here," I pointed out. "And yes, you provided material necessities. That is what parents are supposed to do. But love, acceptance, emotional support, those were always conditional, always in short supply, and always more readily available to Heather than to me." "Do not bring your sister into this," Marian snapped. "Actually," Heather interjected unexpectedly, "she is not wrong, Mom. You have always been harder on Jacqueline." Marian looked betrayed. "Heather, how can you say that?" "Because it is true," Heather said quietly. "I have benefited from it my whole life, but that does not make it right." I felt a surge of surprise and gratitude toward my sister. We had never been close. Our relationship strained by Marian's obvious favoritism, but in this moment, Heather was acknowledging a truth that had shaped both our lives. Uncle Frank cleared his throat. "Marian, I have to say what you said to Jacqueline was cruel, joke or not." "You too, Frank," Marian said incredulously. "My own family turning against me in my home." "Nobody is turning against you," I said. "We are simply acknowledging reality. A reality I have lived with for 35 years but never felt allowed to speak about." "And what reality is that?" Marian asked, her voice sharp with defensiveness. "That you never wanted me. That nothing I ever did was good enough. That you resented my very existence." I maintained eye contact, refusing to be the first to look away. "Do you know what it does to a child to grow up knowing her mother does not love her? To constantly seek approval that never comes, to achieve and succeed and still be treated as a disappointment? Marian's lips thinned to a tight line. You always were prone to exaggeration. Was it an exaggeration when you missed my high school graduation because you had a garden club meeting you could not reschedule, I asked? Or when you told me my choice of college was selfish because it took me too far from home, even though you clearly preferred when I was not around? Or when you introduced me to your church friends as my other daughter, the one who works with computers, because my career did not impress you like Heather's did? Each example landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of discomfort around the table. Howard looked particularly pained, perhaps recognizing his own complicity in allowing these dynamics to persist unchallenged. Ancient history, Marian dismissed with a wave of her hand. Are you really going to sit there and list every perceived slight from your childhood? How tiresome. Not tiresome, I corrected, truthful, and not just ancient history. 10 minutes ago you said you wished I had never been born. That is not a perceived slight. That is a mother rejecting her child's very existence. The directness of my statement seemed to make everyone at the table uncomfortable. Donna, who had been watching the exchange with poorly concealed fascination, suddenly became very interested in rearranging her napkin. I think Howard said hesitantly we should all take a deep breath and calm down. Family disagreements happen, but we can work through this. I turned to my father, seeing him clearly too. Dad, with all due respect, this is not a disagreement about politics or what movie to watch. This is about decades of emotional neglect that you witnessed and did nothing to address. Your silence was its own form of rejection. Howard flinched as if I had slapped him. Jacqueline, I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted peace in the family. Peace at what cost? I asked quietly. My self-worth, my emotional health, my relationship with my mother. Linda spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. Marian, I love you dearly. You are my sister. But I have watched how you treat Jacqueline for years, and it has always troubled me. What she is saying is not wrong. Marian stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I will not sit here and be attacked in my own home. This is outrageous. After all I have done, after all the sacrifices to be treated this way. No one is attacking you, I said, remaining seated, maintaining my composure. I am simply responding honestly to what you said. If that feels like an attack, perhaps you should consider why. Marian's hands were shaking now, whether from anger or some other emotion, I could not tell. You, ungrateful, disrespectful. I knew you should not have come today. I told Howard it was a mistake to invite you, that you would ruin Thanksgiving as you ruin everything, but he insisted. Family should be together for the holidays, he said. Well, this is what happens when I listen to him instead of my own instincts. Howard looked wounded. Marian, please, that is not fair. Fair? Marian's voice rose. Was it fair to saddle me with a second child I never wanted? Was it fair to expect me to love someone who has done nothing but defy and disappoint me from the day she was born? Was it fair to invite her here today knowing she would find some way to make herself the center of attention? The room went still again. Marian seemed to realize what she had admitted and pressed her lips together, but it was too late. The truth was out nakedly, undeniably out. Thank you for your honesty, I said quietly. Now we all know where we stand. I stood up slowly, placing my napkin beside my plate. I think it is best if I leave now. Jacqueline, no, Howard protested. Please stay, we can work this out. There is nothing to work out, Dad, I said gently. Mother has made her feelings clear, not just today but throughout my life. I have spent 35 years trying to earn the love of someone who just admitted she never wanted me in the first place. I am done trying. I looked around the table, taking in each face. I am sorry if my leaving disrupts the holiday. That was never my intention. I came here hoping for reconciliation, or at least understanding. I did not get that, but I did get clarity, and for that I am actually grateful. Marian was still standing, her face a mask of indignation and something else, something that might have been fear. If you walk out that door, she said, do not expect to be welcomed back. Howard made a distressed sound. Marian, stop. You do not mean that. I absolutely do, she insisted. I am tired of walking on eggshells around her sensitivity, her constant need for attention and validation. If she wants to leave, let her leave. I nodded slowly. Goodbye, Mother. I turned to go, but paused as Jessica stood up. I will walk you out, she said firmly. Kyle stood too. Me too. To my surprise, Heather also rose from her chair. Jacqueline, wait. As I moved toward the hallway, I heard chairs scraping behind me as more people stood. The exodus from Marion's perfect Thanksgiving dinner had begun, and I felt a mixture of sadness and vindication. This had never been my goal, but perhaps it was an inevitable outcome of truth finally being spoken aloud. I collected my coat from the front closet, suddenly eager to be outside in the cold, clean November air, away from the suffocating tension of the dining room. Jessica handed me my purse, her eyes conveying silent support. Are you okay to drive? Kyle asked quietly. I nodded. I am fine. Surprisingly fine, actually. Heather approached, looking uncertain. Jacqueline, I am sorry. I should have said something years ago. It is not your fault, I told her sincerely. We were both just playing the roles we were assigned. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Will you keep in touch? About the baby and everything? I would like that, I said, surprised to find I meant it. As I opened the front door, I heard Marion's voice from the dining room, loud and indignant. Well, is everyone leaving now? Is my entire Thanksgiving ruined because Jacqueline cannot take a joke? I stepped outside the cold air, a shock against my flushed skin. Behind me, I heard Howard's voice, unusually firm. That is enough, Marion. That is absolutely enough. I walked to my car, each step feeling lighter than the last. The chains of seeking Marion's approval, chains I had carried my entire life, seemed to fall away with each footfall on the leaf-strewn path. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away from my childhood home without looking back. For the first time in 35 years, I felt truly free. The first few miles of the drive were a blur. I navigated automatically, muscle memory, guiding me through the familiar streets of my hometown and toward the highway. But as the reality of what had just happened began to sink in, my hands started trembling on the steering wheel. My vision blurred with tears. I had been too shocked to shed at the dinner table. I pulled into the parking lot of a closed, seasonal ice cream stand, shut off the engine, and finally allowed myself to feel the full impact of Marion's words and my response. The tears came in waves, decades of repressed pain, finding release at last. I cried for the little girl who had never understood why her mother did not love her. I cried for the teenager who had achieved and succeeded in a desperate bid for approval that never came. I cried for the adult who had built a life separate from her family, but had never fully escaped the emotional damage of her upbringing. But mixed with the grief was something unexpected: relief. I had finally spoken my truth. I had named the dynamics that had shaped our family for decades. I had refused to play my assigned role in the dysfunctional script, and in doing so, I had freed myself. My phone began buzzing with texts and calls almost immediately. Jessica sent a supportive message. So proud of you. Call me tomorrow if you want to talk. Kyle texted. You were amazing. Marion was wrong. Always has been. Heather's message surprised me the most. I need to apologize properly. Not just for today, but for a lifetime of watching and saying nothing. Can we talk when things calm down? Howard called 3 times, but I let it go to voicemail, not ready to hear his placating words or attempts to smooth things over. When I finally listened to his message hours later, his voice sounded different, almost broken. Jacqueline, what your mother said was inexcusable. I should have protected you better. I am so sorry. Please call me when you can. The most telling silence came from Marion. No call, no text, no acknowledgement whatsoever. It confirmed what I had finally accepted: she was incapable of the self-reflection necessary to recognize her role in our broken relationship. I checked into a hotel for the night rather than attempting the long drive back to Boston in my emotional state. The anonymity of the chain hotel room was comforting, a neutral space without memories or associations. I ordered room service, took a long shower, and called Stephanie, my best friend in Boston. She said, "What?" Stephanie exclaimed when I recounted the dinner conversation. "Jacqueline, that is beyond awful. That is emotional abuse, plain and simple." The strange thing is, I said, wrapping myself in the hotel bathrobe, as horrible as it was to hear those words out loud, it was also validating. I have spent my whole life feeling unwanted by her, And now I know for certain it was not my imagination. What will you do now? Stephanie asked. About your family, I mean. I honestly do not know, I admitted. I cannot imagine having a relationship with Marion after this. But, Howard Heather, the extended family, it is complicated. One day at a time, Stephanie advised. You have been through enough today. Just know, I am here for you, whatever you decide. Her unconditional support brought fresh tears to my eyes, a poignant contrast to the conditional love I had grown up with. The next few days passed in a fog as I returned to Boston and attempted to process what had happened. Physical symptoms manifested headaches, insomnia, a knot of tension between my shoulder blades that would not release. My body was expressing what my mind was still struggling to fully comprehend: the depth of the rupture with my mother and the implications for my entire family system. I called Dr. Rachel and scheduled an emergency therapy session. Sitting in her familiar office the following Monday, I recounted the Thanksgiving dinner in detail. What you described is textbook maternal narcissism, Dr. Rachel said when I finished. Marion has shown these patterns throughout your life, but her statement at dinner was a particularly naked expression of her inability to see you as a separate person with valid needs and feelings. Why did I keep trying for so long? I asked. Why did I keep hoping she would change, that somehow I could earn her love? Because that is what children do, doctor, Rachel replied gently. Children need their parents' love to survive, so when that love is withheld or conditional, they blame themselves rather than the parent. If only I were better, smarter, prettier, more accomplished, then Mom would love me. It is a survival mechanism that often persists into adulthood. What do I do now? I asked the same question I had posed to Stephanie, still seeking an answer that would make sense of the upheaval. You grieve, doctor, Rachel said simply. You grieve the mother you needed but never had. You grieve the relationship that should have nurtured you but instead caused harm. And then gradually, you build a life based on healthier relationships and your own internal sense of worth, rather than seeking validation from someone incapable of providing it. The wisdom of her words resonated, but the path forward still seemed foggy and uncertain. A week after Thanksgiving, Howard showed up at my apartment unannounced. He looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and clothes that seemed to hang more loosely on his frame. Dad, I said, surprised to find him on my doorstep. What are you doing here? I needed to see you, he said, to talk to you face to face. May I come in? I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him enter. My apartment, with its modern furniture and tech industry awards displayed on the bookshelves, felt like a statement of my independent adult life separate from the family dynamics that had shaped my childhood. Howard sat heavily on my sofa, looking around as if seeing my life clearly for the first time. This is nice, he said. You have done well for yourself. Thank you, I replied, sitting across from him. Would you like some coffee? He shook his head. Jacqueline, I came to apologize. What happened at Thanksgiving, what your mother said, it was unforgivable. And yet you stayed with her, I observed, not accusingly but matter-of-factly. Howard sighed deeply. I have been married to Marion for 40 years. I love her despite her flaws, but loving her does not mean I condone how she treated you. I should have done more to protect you when you were growing up. I should have intervened more often, more effectively. Why did not you? I asked the question I had wanted to ask for decades. He was quiet for a long moment. Fear partly. Marion has a forceful personality, as you know. When I did try to intervene, it usually made things worse. She would be harder on you when I was not around. Or she would withdraw from both of us. I told myself I was keeping the peace, but the truth is I took the path of least resistance, and you paid the price for that. His honesty was unexpected and oddly healing. For the first time, Howard was acknowledging his role in the family dysfunction rather than making excuses or trying to smooth things over. What happens now, I asked, with you and Marion? I do not know, he admitted. Things have been difficult since Thanksgiving. She refuses to acknowledge that she did anything wrong. She blames you for ruining the holiday and turning the family against her. I have tried to make her understand the gravity of what she said, but she is defensive and angry. That sounds like Marion, I said, a hint of sad humor in my voice. Howard nodded. I want to have a relationship with you, Jacqueline, independent of whatever happens with your mother. I know I have not been the father you deserved, but I would like the chance to do better. The sincerity in his voice moved me. I would like that too, I said softly. But I need you to understand that I cannot have Marion in my life right now. Maybe not ever. Her presence is toxic for me. I understand, he said, and I will respect that boundary. I can visit you here or we can meet somewhere neutral. Whatever works for you. As Howard prepared to leave, he paused at the door. Everyone left after you, did you know? Thanksgiving dinner was effectively over. Linda and Frank took Jessica and Kyle back to their hotel. Heather and Thomas went home. Even Donna made an excuse to leave early. Marion was furious, but I think she was also shocked. No one has ever held her accountable like that before. I nodded, absorbing this information. And Christmas, I asked, thinking of the approaching holiday. I do not know yet, Howard admitted, but whatever happens, it will be different. Things cannot go back to how they were before. You made sure of that. After he left, I felt another piece of the emotional weight lift. Howard's visit had not resolved everything, but it had opened a door to a potentially healthier relationship with my father, one based on honesty rather than avoidance. As Christmas approached, I made plans with Stephanie and other friends in Boston, creating new traditions to replace the strained family gatherings of the past. Heather called several times, our conversations tentative at first, but gradually more open. She was struggling to reconcile her experience of Marion as a loving, supportive mother with my vastly different experience of the same woman. I feel guilty, she confessed during one call, like I somehow benefited from her mistreatment of you. You were a child too, I reminded her. You did not create the dynamic. But I participated in it, she said. All those times I went along with her criticism of you or accepted praise at your expense. I was complicit. We were all doing the best we could in a dysfunctional system, I said, echoing Dr. Rachel's words from therapy. The important thing is that we see it clearly now. The pregnancy had made Heather reflective about what kind of mother she wanted to be, and our shared experience of Marion, however different our individual roles had been, provided common ground for a new kind of sisterly relationship. Marion maintained her silence. No Christmas card arrived from Connecticut. No call on my birthday in January. Her absence was both painful and freeing. I missed not the mother she had been, but the mother I had always wished she could be. In therapy, I worked through the complex grief of accepting that Marion would likely never change, never acknowledge the harm she had caused, never become the nurturing figure I had longed for throughout my life. It was a different kind of loss than death, in some ways harder to process, because the person was still physically present in the world, but emotionally unavailable. The hardest part of healing from parental rejection, Dr. Rachel told me, is accepting that the fantasy of reconciliation may never come true. That the happy ending where your mother suddenly sees you clearly and loves you as you deserve to be loved is unlikely to happen. So I just give up hope, I asked. Not hope itself, she clarified, but the specific hope that Marion will transform into a different person. Instead, you redirect that hope toward building a life filled with people who can give you the love and acceptance she could not. Over the next few months, I did exactly that. I deepened existing friendships, reconnected with supportive extended family members like Jessica and Kyle, developed a more honest relationship with Howard, and even found a tentative new connection with Heather. I poured energy into my work, my hobbies, and my self-care routines. And gradually the ache of Marion's rejection began to lessen. Not disappear, but transform into something I could carry without being defined by it. The little girl inside me, who had desperately sought her mother's approval, began to heal as I learned to give myself the validation Marion had withheld. 6 months after that fateful Thanksgiving dinner, I could look back on it not just as a moment of pain, but as the catalyst for profound change and growth in my life. The truth once spoken had set me free in ways I had not imagined possible. Spring arrived in Boston, bringing cherry blossoms to the public garden and a sense of renewal that mirrored my internal journey. 6 months had passed since the confrontation with Marion. 6 months of intensive therapy, boundary setting, and rebuilding my life on more authentic terms. The changes were both subtle and profound. I smiled more easily. I stood straighter. Colleagues commented on my increased confidence in meetings. Friends noted that I seemed more present, more engaged, less likely to deflect compliments or minimize my achievements. I no longer felt the need to prove my worth through constant accomplishment or perfectionism. My relationship with Howard had evolved into something unexpected. Without Marion as a buffer or focus, we discovered common interests and perspectives. He visited Boston monthly, and we explored the city together, having conversations that went beyond surface pleasantries for the first time in our lives. He was seeing a therapist too, working through his own patterns of conflict avoidance and examining his role in our family dynamics. "I keep thinking about all the times I should have spoken up," he told me over lunch at a waterfront restaurant. "All the times I heard Marion criticize you and said nothing." "You cannot change the past," I said, surprising myself with the lack of resentment in my voice. "But you are showing up differently now, and that matters." He reached across the table to squeeze my hand, a rare gesture of physical affection from my typically reserved father. "I am proud of you, Jacqueline. Not just for your professional success, but for your courage in speaking your truth. I wish I had half your strength." From Marion, there was continued silence. No calls, no messages, no acknowledgement of my existence. Howard kept me minimally informed she was carrying on with her social committees and garden club, presenting a facade of normalcy to the outside world. While privately seething about my betrayal and the family members who had taken my side. "Does it still hurt, doctor?" Rachel asked during one of our sessions. Her silence. I considered the question carefully. Yes and no. Yes, because some part of me still wishes for the mother I never had. No, because her silence is actually healthier for me than her criticism and rejection ever were. Dr. Rachel nodded. That is an important insight. Sometimes the absence of a toxic relationship creates space for healing that could never happen within that relationship. Heather gave birth to a boy in May, naming him Daniel Howard after our father. When she sent photos, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Joy for my sister, curiosity about my new nephew, anxiety about whether family gatherings around the baby would pressure me to reconcile with Marion before I was ready, if ever. "I want you to be part of his life," Heather told me during a video call, the baby sleeping against her shoulder. "But I will respect your boundaries about Mom. We can arrange visits when she is not around, or you can come to our house instead of theirs." This new, more sensitive version of my sister was another unexpected gift from the Thanksgiving confrontation. The artificial division between us, created and maintained by Marion's favoritism, had begun to dissolve in her absence. I met my nephew for the first time when he was 2 months old. Heather and Thomas brought him to Boston for a weekend, staying in a hotel downtown. We spent a sunny afternoon in the public garden, walking with the stroller and talking more openly than we ever had before. "I used to be jealous of you," Heather confessed as we sat on a bench watching a swan boat glide across the pond. "You gotta leave to build your own life away from her expectations." I stayed close, played by all her rules, and sometimes it feels like a cage of my own making. "I was always jealous of you," I admitted. "You got the love and approval I craved. You were the daughter she wanted." Heather adjusted the baby's blanket. "I think the daughter she wanted was a reflection of herself, not a real person with her own needs and identity. I just happened to fit her image better than you did. But that is not real love, is it?" "No," I agreed quietly, "it is not." As summer progressed, I found myself building what therapists call a chosen family. A network of supportive relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care rather than biological obligation. Stephanie remained my closest friend, but my circle expanded to include colleagues who became friends, neighbors in my apartment building, and members of a hiking group I had joined. I even began dating again, something I had avoided for years due to fears of vulnerability and rejection rooted in my relationship with Marion. Brian, a software architect I met through a professional conference, was patient with my initial hesitation and respectful of my boundaries. Unlike previous relationships where I had hidden my family history out of shame, I was honest with Brian about my estrangement from Marion and the reasons behind it. "Family is complicated," he said after I shared the Thanksgiving story. "My parents divorced when I was 12, and my dad basically disappeared from my life. It leaves marks on you, but it does not have to define you. His understanding created space for a deeper connection than I had allowed myself in previous relationships. For the first time, I could imagine building a future with someone without fear that my baggage would eventually drive them away. Professional success continued as well. My AI project received industry recognition, and I was invited to speak at conferences about our innovative approach. In the past, achievements had always been tinged with the knowledge that Marian would find some way to diminish them. Now I could fully own and celebrate my success without that shadow. On the anniversary of the Thanksgiving confrontation, I took a personal day from work and went to a quiet beach on the North Shore. The November day was cold, but clear, the off-season beach nearly deserted. I walked along the shore, reflecting on the year of transformation. The most profound change was internal. I no longer defined myself in relation to Marian's approval or disapproval. I no longer heard her critical voice in my head when I made decisions. I no longer felt the need to prove my worth through achievement or perfectionism. I had begun the journey of reparenting myself, giving my inner child the acceptance and validation that Marian had withheld. Dr. Rachel had helped me understand that Marian's inability to love me properly was never about my worthiness. It was about her limitations, her unresolved issues, perhaps her own childhood wounds that she had never healed. This understanding did not excuse her behavior, but it helped me stop internalizing her rejection as evidence of my own deficiency. I had also learned that walking away from toxic relationships, even familial ones, was not selfish or weak, but often the strongest, most self-preserving choice. The cultural expectation that we must maintain relationships with family members regardless of how they treat us had kept me trapped in a cycle of hope, hurt, and disappointment for decades. Breaking that cycle had been essential to my healing. Perhaps most importantly, I had discovered that we cannot make people love us properly, but we can choose to surround ourselves with those who do. Love should not be earned through achievement or compliance, but given freely with acceptance of our authentic selves. In letting go of the fantasy that I could somehow win Marian's love by being better, I had opened myself to receiving real love from others and crucially from myself. As I walked back to my car, I felt a sense of peace that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. The pain of Marian's rejection had not disappeared entirely, but it had transformed from an open wound to a healing scar, a part of my story, but no longer the defining chapter. That evening, I called Howard. "I am doing well, Dad," I told him before he could ask. "Really well." "I am glad," he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "You deserve to be happy, Jacqueline." "We all do," I replied. "Even Marian in her own way." "That is very generous of you to say." "It is not about forgiveness exactly," I clarified. "It is about understanding that her limitations are her burden to carry, not mine. I do not wish her ill. I just cannot have her in my life." After we hung up, I sat on my balcony looking out at the Boston skyline, feeling grateful for the hard-won wisdom of the past year. The journey was ongoing, but I was no longer walking it in darkness, searching for a light of approval that would never shine for me. I had learned to generate my own light, to trust my own worth, to live authentically, rather than performatively. Marian had said she wished I had never been born, but in the aftermath of that devastating statement, I had discovered how to truly live. And that was perhaps the most perfect reply of all. Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic relationship for your own well-being? What was your turning point moment when you realized things needed to change? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and self-discovery. Remember that sometimes the most courageous thing we can do is set boundaries with those who cannot love us properly. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength on your own path to healing.